had always loved venturing into the forests alone. My whole life, I grew used to camping, long-distance hiking, and hunting across California. Nature was where I felt most at peace, and I respected it deeply. A few years ago, my wife, my daughter, our 2 German shepherds, and I decided to go camping in an area north of Mount Jefferson. We found what seemed like the perfect spot, just off a dirt road, tucked between thick trees in a half-circle clearing with level ground and a small fire pit. The place was incredibly quiet, ideal, since our dogs tend to frighten people with their loud barking when startled, and we needed some privacy. On the first night, my daughter said she wanted to sleep alone in a small tent right next to ours. The 2 tents were only a few feet apart, so I let our large German shepherd, Jack, sleep inside her tent. My wife and I barely slept that night. We kept hearing heavy, deliberate footsteps circling our campsite. They weren't like the usual rustling of small forest animals. These sounded like something walking on 2 legs. I was well armed because 2 days before the trip, I had read about a man in California who was shot dead while sleeping in his tent beside his young daughters. That story had left me uneasy. My wife and I both carried handguns, and I had brought my rifle as well. Still, I felt somewhat reassured knowing our dogs were trained and fearless, especially Jack, who stayed with my daughter. I was certain that if anyone tried to get near her, they wouldn't make it out alive. The entire night passed with tension, anxiety, and the sound of those footsteps pacing around us. I eventually tried to convince myself it was just deer or maybe a bear, and forced the thought away. The next morning, we went for a short walk along the road beside our campsite. After about 300 feet, I noticed a side path that looked abandoned. A broken gate lay swallowed by plants, and through the green the first caught sight of something blue. Jack saw it too and bolted toward it at full speed. My heart dropped. I was terrified he might scare another family camping there, or that someone might shoot him. I sprinted after him, with my wife, daughter, and our other dog following behind. Jack stopped about 20 feet in, and as I approached, I realized the area was empty, but incredibly strange. I called out, "Is anyone here? Sorry about the dog." No answer. My curiosity pushed me forward, and the closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. The place looked like an abandoned campsite, but everything was shredded and slashed. The tent, a small gas stove, a portable fridge, blankets, table, everything torn apart as if by massive claws. We stood there in confusion, wondering why someone would leave such expensive gear in that state. Even the tent was a high-quality one. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe whoever was here had some emergency and left in a rush, and then animals attacked the rest. But the strangest part was that the gas tank and the fridge were completely flattened against the ground, as if something extremely heavy had fallen on top of them. Neither snow nor fallen trees could have done that. Later that afternoon, I was playing ball with my daughter while my wife took a walk about 70 feet away. I couldn't see her, but suddenly I saw Jack sprinting toward her with incredible speed. He never ran off like that unless someone called him, and she hadn't. The way he ran made my chest tighten. Something was wrong. I ran after him and saw my wife running toward me in panic. I pulled out my handgun instantly. Jack ran another 100 feet into the woods before I shouted for him, and he returned immediately. Our other dog, Lilo, the bold one who always likes to lead, stayed glued to my daughter, trembling, her fur raised, her face tense. I'd known her for 7 years and had never seen her so terrified. I asked my wife what had happened, and she said that while she was walking, she suddenly felt someone watching her. When she saw Jack charging toward her, she panicked and ran. We searched for about 10 minutes for any sign of something or someone. Broken branches, footprints, anything, but found absolutely nothing. We decided to stay one more night because it was getting late, and we didn't have enough time to pack up and leave safely. But this time, we would all sleep in one tent. Before bed, I made a rope perimeter around our campsite and tied a mint tin filled with coins and my car keys to it, so it would rattle if someone tripped a line. It was a primitive alarm system, but it helped calm my wife down. As I tied the last end of the rope near a tree beside the tent, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. An old, brown rope embedded into the tree trunk, as if it had been there for many years, tied at the exact same height I had chosen, about 3 or 4 inches above the ground. It even had old metal pieces attached to it that would make noise if disturbed. Whoever had camped there years ago had made the same alarm system I just had, and clearly, they had done it to protect themselves from something. A surge of fear hit me, but I knew I had to act. I brought my wife and daughter into the car and locked them inside. Then I took my handgun and fired a shot into the ground as a warning. I shouted loudly, "Whoever is out there, you know now that we are armed, and we have 2 dogs. If you're planning anything, think twice." That night, we didn't hear a single step. The dogs didn't bark once. The next morning, we left as early as possible. Some time later, while watching a documentary, I discovered that the area they were talking about was the exact spot where we had camped. Someone had been killed there. The world seemed to go dark around me as I remembered the shredded campsite, the slashed tent, the flattened fridge. We continued camping afterward in other places and enjoyed the beauty of the Pacific Northwest. But that place, something was there. Something that had been less than 300 feet from us. And whatever it was, it might have been the same thing that took, or killed, the people who had camped before us. To this day, whenever I think about that night, I thank God that Jack was awake, alert, and watching the woods, because he may very well be the only reason we're all still alive. This incident happened 2 years ago, and Kate has only now decided to share it, now that her life has finally become stable again. She and Adam had gone on a 2-night camping trip to a spot only half an hour away from their home by car. The area was well known and usually full of visitors every summer, yet it was surrounded by dense forests, and the nights there were strangely quiet and unsettling. Adam wasn't American like she was. He was black. And that detail matters, because the region they lived in was populated mostly by white residents who were notoriously hostile and prejudiced. On their first night, they heard strange noises outside the tent, soft rustling in the trees, leaves shifting as if something heavy was moving past them. The sound was deep, as though a large creature or a person was walking just a few feet away. They assumed it was a deer, a bear, or some other animal they were used to seeing, so they ignored it. The next day, August 11th, they spent time with Kate's family in the nearby town. It was a pleasant day, especially because Adam had prepared a surprise for her. He planned to propose, and he did. They got engaged, and everyone celebrated with them. Around 6 in the evening, they returned to their campsite, but the moment they stepped out of the car, they sensed something was wrong. There were footprints in the dirt right in front of their tent, and the entire interior was a mess. Clothes thrown everywhere, blankets flipped over, the bag unzipped, and several of Kate's outfits missing. They were shocked by the sight, but being 19-year-olds, they tried to stay calm. Whoever came took what they wanted and left. Nothing valuable went missing, they told themselves. So they decided to continue the night as though nothing had happened. They lit a fire, grilled hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, had some drinks, smoked a few cigarettes, and celebrated in their own way. Around 9:30, they put out the fire and went inside the tent. The night was silent and pitch black. Everything seemed fine, until the noises came back. But this time, everything was different. Heavy footsteps circled the tent, and a low whispering sound drifted through the darkness, a man's voice speaking softly. Adam looked at Kate, and both of their eyes widened. There was someone outside. Moments later, another whisper joined the first. 2 people were walking around them. Adam leaned toward Kate and whispered, I need to go to the restroom." It was a silent signal they both understood. The bathrooms were up on the hill, a bit far from the site, and most campers went there by car. They hurried to get dressed. Adam switched on the tent light to see what he was doing. The second he slipped on his shirt, a voice came from right outside the thin tent wall. A man's voice, deep, oily, full of malice. He said mockingly, "What are you 2 doing in there?" There was something demonic about the tone. No other way to describe it. He laughed while speaking, and it was clear he could see their silhouettes through the fabric. It was one of the most terrifying moments of Kate and Adam's lives. Without a second of hesitation, Adam grabbed a small knife, snatched the car keys, grabbed Kate by the hand, and the two of them sprinted toward the car. Behind them, footsteps erupted. Someone was running after them. And even worse, another set of footsteps veered off in a different direction, as if circling around to cut them off. They reached the bathrooms and locked themselves inside, gasping for breath, shaking violently from fear. They debated what to do. Should they sleep in the car? Should they leave immediately? In the end, they decided to go back quickly, pack everything, and get out of there. They left the bathrooms around midnight, and within 5 minutes they had collapsed the entire tent, with all their belongings still inside, collected the chairs, and thrown everything into the car. Right before they drove away, Kate remembered the wooden name sign with her full name carved on it, hanging on the tent pole. She jumped out, grabbed it, and rushed back to the car. As they were pulling onto the road, they saw them. 2 men stepping out from between the trees, walking toward the tent site. Kate's heart froze. They were the same 2 men who had been wandering around all day, glaring at them with hateful eyes, mumbling words they couldn't understand. One was wearing full camouflage hunting gear. The other wore a black sleeveless shirt, and both carried large hunting knives, unsheathed, gleaming under the headlights. The moment they saw the car moving, one of them sprinted forward as if to chase it, but the second man extended his arm and stopped him. Kate looked through the window and saw the man in hunting gear smiling at her, a wicked, evil smile. Then he slowly shook his head, as if saying, "Not tonight." They sped off as fast as the road allowed, taking multiple turns and weaving through side paths just to make sure they weren't being followed. Kate called her father while they were still driving, and when they finally reached home and told him everything, he laughed, saying they were probably just more tense than they realized. But Kate, even now, is certain that night could have been the end of them. Those 2 men weren't just strangers passing by. They had been watching them since the morning, and the attack was clearly racially motivated because Adam wasn't white. Even now, whenever Kate remembers the hunter's eyes staring straight at her, her blood turns to ice. She still recalls his smile, and that voice inside her that whispers, "You were only seconds away from dying." This event took place many years ago, yet Jessica still hasn't been able to erase it from her mind. She was 13 when her parents decided to send her to a girls' camp they claimed was designed to help young girls improve themselves and become better versions of who they are. But the truth was far less inspiring. It was a weight loss camp. The program was hosted on a university campus, and the girls were placed in student dormitories, 2 girls assigned to each room. Jessica disliked the idea from the beginning, but she tried to stay optimistic, hoping the summer wouldn't be a total waste, especially after she met a kind, friendly-looking girl named Chris. The 2 connected instantly. They had similar personalities, similar humor, and by the first day, they were laughing together like old friends. At night, they talked for hours about everything: how to escape the camp, how awful the food was, and how their parents must have sold them off to suffer through this miserable summer. Jessica couldn't help noticing that Chris wasn't overweight at all. In fact, she had a toned, athletic build. When Jessica finally asked why she was there, Chris explained that her parents had signed her up for the entire summer, not just the short 2-week program Jessica was attending. A few days later, a girl Jessica had quietly become friendly with pulled her aside and whispered, "Be careful around Chris, that girl has issues." And every girl who roomed with her before ended up switching rooms. Jessica simply laughed. Those are just rumors. The girls are probably jealous of her. But that night, Chris's behavior changed dramatically. She was withdrawn and unusually quiet. When Jessica asked what was wrong, Chris suddenly dissolved into tears. She kept repeating that everyone hated her and that Jessica would abandon her like all the others. She told Jessica about a former friend who had left her for other girls and how deeply it had hurt her. Jessica believed every word and felt genuinely sympathetic, unaware that Chris's obsessive attachment was gradually isolating her from everyone else. Toward the end of the final week, the supervisors took the girls to a nearby public swimming pool. The weather was scorching, and everyone was excited for a break. As soon as they arrived, Jessica and Chris claimed 2 chairs and dropped off their bags. Chris immediately headed toward the water. Jessica stayed behind because she needed to complete a simple swim test required for new campers. She passed easily. She had been on a swim team before. She slipped into the water and began swimming gently until she heard Chris shouting her name from across the pool. Chris was standing at the deep end, motioning for her to come over. Jessica swam closer and asked, "What's wrong?" Chris smiled strangely and said, "Come here. I want to show you something." And in the next instant, everything became a nightmare. Chris's hands shot toward Jessica's neck, dragging her underwater. Jessica fought to break free. She had the skill to escape, but sheer terror paralyzed her. She opened her mouth to scream, but instead swallowed water. Her entire body froze in fear. At the last possible moment, she managed to kick Chris with both legs, pushing her away long enough to swim desperately toward the edge of the pool. She pulled herself out, gasping and shaking, unable to process what had just happened. When she turned around, Chris was still standing in the water, glaring at her with the furious, burning intensity. Jessica fled to the bathroom, locked herself inside, and called her mother using the phone she had secretly brought with her. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. But even then, her mother didn't fully believe her. Jessica stayed locked in the bathroom until the trip ended, and on the walk back to camp she stuck as close as possible to the supervisor, terrified to be anywhere near Chris. When they returned, the head supervisor summoned her angrily. "Hand me your phone." Jessica denied having one and asked why. The supervisor explained that her parents had called, saying Jessica had reported an assault. Thinking fast, Jessica lied, claiming she had borrowed a phone from a stranger in the bathroom. They accepted the explanation and informed her she would be reassigned to a different room, but the move wouldn't happen until the next morning. She would have to spend the night with Chris. Jessica broke down completely, begging them to let her sleep anywhere else, even on the floor. But they refused, insisting she was exaggerating. She returned to her room, and only then did her mother call again, this time revealing a disturbing truth. Chris had done this before. Jessica was the 6th girl assigned to room with her. The first 3 had left camp early, and the next 2 had switched rooms immediately. All of them said Chris was violent and had tried to hurt them, but the camp administration brushed it off, claiming she had emotional issues and needed help making friends. That night, Jessica didn't close her eyes once, and neither did Chris. Chris sat upright on her bed the entire night, staring silently at Jessica. Jessica clutched her phone tightly, her thumb hovering over 911, ready to call at any moment. When morning finally came, Jessica cried tears of relief when they informed her she could move rooms. But later that day, while carrying her bags, she slipped and fell, breaking her foot. Her parents came to pick her up, and she went home with her leg in a cast, and a horrifying memory from a camp that was supposed to help her grow. Since that day, Jessica has never been able to share a room with anyone again, and forming new friendships has become painfully difficult. Even now, whenever she remembers Chris sitting there all night, staring at her with those empty, expressionless eyes, she feels a cold shiver deep inside her. And from that moment forward, Jessica has hoped never to cross paths with Chris again, not even by accident.